Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's ISE webinar. We're going to be talking everything at ChatGPT. We've got a very esteemed panel to talk to us today, to have a conversation with, who I'll introduce very, very shortly. First of all, just a bit of background. If this is your first time on the ISE webinars, but I think most people have done one of our webinars by now. We've done so many over the last few years, but we aim to make them as interactive as possible. Please use the chat. Please use the Q&A. We've got, this is very much a hot topic. We've got a significant number of people who will be joining us throughout the webinar, no doubt. So I'll keep an eye on the Q&A box as we go through. We'll have time at the end to get back to questions for the panel. Probably leave about 15 minutes towards the end. So I will keep an eye on those. And we are also recording it. So if you'll get the link a little bit later. We'll also put it on our website, so please do share it with colleagues, because we're very keen, as always, to spread as much of our learnings as possible. Right, so let's get into it, because I think we're going to have quite a lot of questions coming through. This is the second ChatGPT webinar that we've done, and the last one prompted a lot of discussion, shall we say. So I'm sure we'll have the same today. So should we do some introductions first? So if we go around the screen as I can see it, Zach, do you want to say hello first?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, and hello, everyone. I am Zach. I'm the chief exec of a group called Unseen. We're a collective of brands in the early career space, which include Top Score, GradCore, and graduate jobs. Thanks, Stephen.
Cool. Thanks, Zach. Helen, would you like to say hello?
Thanks so much, Stephen, and great to be with you all. I'm Helen Dovey. I'm the Chief Assessment Officer at Cappfinity. I'm a chartered psychologist by background, and I oversee all of our psychological solutions across our global clients. It's great to be with you.
Thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to introduce today Manny, who's dialing in all the way from the US. Manny, would you like to sort of say hello and give us a bit of a background into your role?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Hello, everyone. My name is Manny Contomanolis. I'm the director of the Mignoni Center for Career Success at Harvard University, where we support all the undergraduates from Harvard College, the master's and PhD students from the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, and continuing education learners at Harvard. And just delighted to join the group this morning.
Fantastic. And in case I forget to say at the end, thank you to all of you for contributing your time to this. As what I said, is a very, very lively debate. Only this morning I was doing some awards of students' digital work, actually, for Adobe. And as we wrapped up, one of the things we said was, of course, the criteria didn't even mention AI. And of course, when those awards are done next year, creative work AI is going to impinge everything we do. So, but today we're going to be talking about its impact, both on students, what's happening in the career space, but also then focusing on actually what's happening in terms of the world of applying for jobs and all tools and processes that we use, and impact now and possible what those developments will be in the future. So as I said, I've got a few questions that we'll go through, that myself and the panel have agreed to kind of cover the topics we want to, but really pleased to hear from you as well. So do pop those questions in the Q&A as we go through the webinar. So can I start with you, Manny? Just a little bit it'd be interesting to know just how you see students are using AI in their career thinking, how it's affecting their approaches to job hunt. How's it impacting your world at the moment?
Sure. I think there's two things when you think about university students. When they think about AI, it really falls into two categories. One is how it advances and influences their academic work, which is, a category now that's still evolving, at least in the US, in terms of higher education, and academic policies. The other, of course, is the use of AI in the job search and in career exploration. I would say broadly, students use, even though sometimes they may not realize that they're using AI informed or AI driven tools. I think that the landscape is changing so quickly and it continues to evolve. Certainly our national association would indicate, based on a number of surveys that we've done with both career advisors and also with students, that AI use is extensive. Students are very comfortable with the idea of utilizing platforms like ChatGPT, Bing, all the others that are out there. And I think that with regard to career kind of exploration and job search tools, I think in general, the philosophy in the US has been to embrace the use of those tools and to encourage their use. After all, the kind of artificial intelligence of today is arguably someone else's intelligence of the past. Students often got advice from others about their CV, about their application materials. They would often do, practice interviews and get feedback from individuals. There are resume writing companies in the States that will take your information and prepare a resume for you. So I think the transition to AI tools, faster, more efficient, arguably more effective, is both logical, rational, and students often behave in these areas very logically and rationally.
Right. And just, sorry, this is a slight diversion, Manny, but as I guess overall as an institution, would you say that Harvard kind of takes view, we've got to embrace AI and work with it? Because I get the sense there's still a little bit of tension around some that might want to police it, control it, stop people from using it, or is that just really trying to stick a finger in it?
That's an astute observation. I think that across higher education in general, I'm sure this is true in the UK and other parts of the world as it is in the States, different institutions react in different ways. I think in general, I would say most institutions, including Harvard, simply recognize that the student code, academic code of conduct with regard to research, your own work, citing, and so forth, is simply suggesting that AI be viewed in the same way. If you use ChatGPT as a tool, or if you reference it, you should acknowledge it as you would any other source. Harvard just recently announced in one of our major introductory computer science courses that AI will be specifically utilized as a tool as part of the course, as a way of, for example, assessing code, testing code, doing those sorts of kind of routine tasks. And I give a tremendous amount of credit to that professor who basically says, I'm now going to be creative about how I embed the use of AI in my coursework.
It's interesting. I was reading in the paper at the weekend. It was a lawyer talking about how they used AI and just saying actually they've got a specific tool that's been invented for the legal sector. It's been used for quite a while, and it just does the work of what some junior lawyers would have done. Does it what would have taken a couple of days of research. Does the work for them. But then they've still got to have that human intelligence afterwards. So, yeah. Right, I'm diverging already, aren't I? Which is always my Achilles heel. So I'll try and keep us on track. Zach or Helen, just before we get into the employer recruiter bit, anything you're seeing more from the student angle, I guess, in terms of increased usage from students? Do you think most students actually know that AI can be used in recruitment and are using it, or is it still there's still a little bit of uncertainty out there?
I think it's being mass adopted at the moment. I think that's kind of the one universal truth in all of this, is that the wave of adoption has been very quick, and the percentage of students and graduates using it now is you're looking at the majority of people using it than not using it. Just caveat that with that's various types of generative AI. There are still tools like GPT-4, which is behind a paywall, but particularly the ones which are more readily accessible are being used by the majority of students at the moment.
So Helen, can I go to you and just start talking a bit about recruiters now? So in terms of actually the recruitment world, what have you seen the impact from your point of view?
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephen. I think as an end-to-end provider across the employee lifecycle, I think we've seen a number of really interesting points of influence. So I think from a psychology perspective, obviously one of the big activities that we're involved with our clients is job analysis. So for a good many years, Cappfinity have asked clients in our qualitative and quantitative research whether or not artificial intelligence was coming into their jobs, how that would be influencing the sorts of tasks and activities that they're completing. And so we've seen this trend emerge in that data. So absolutely what we are seeing with a number of clients across sectors is, as you've noted, Stephen, the increase in using AI for data gathering activities, where huge efficiencies can be gained. in research activities, but there's also a definite data point around the need, as you pointed out, around decision making and human involvement in verification and checking, and that end integrity point. So we've definitely seen that through our job analysis research come to the fore. I think exactly as Manny's described, there's so much that I resonate with his answer. I think in the preparation space, we've seen that have a huge positive influence from AI. So be that in sourcing for jobs or in helping candidates prepare themselves, in the same way as we know career services have for a long time. It's just another mechanism available now to students. I think, of course, one of the biggest topics at the moment is how it's playing through into the assessment space, and that's an incredibly exciting and interesting time, I think, particularly for the psychology community. So, I mean, absolutely, we are seeing clients who want to embrace the role of AI in their work. They want to reflect that in the face validity of their assessments. So we have a number of clients who are interested in showcasing to candidates how the job will look like in the future, either this cycle and future cycles, and reflecting that in the exercise content. So be that performing assessments with AI, without AI, being asked to critique output generated using AI and demonstrate that ability to critique material and use the tool effectively. And then, of course, we've got a great big research agenda, I think, as a professional group around the role of AI in assessments themselves, the methodologies, and that's a highly active research agenda. Chatting to Zach before, I think we're both in a very similar space of having great engineers doing a lot of great research. Our talent science teams really starting to understand how AI does and doesn't impact particular assessment types. So it's a massively interesting time, Stephen, of learning and change.
Is that something you also see, Zach? I'm also wondering actually how AI is actually going to impact all the various different selection methods that we use out there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the kind of the starting point is just, and we touched upon it earlier, is just the volume or rather the percentage of students and grads who are going to be using this. So when you're looking at the research coming out and kind of temperature checks that a few companies have run already, you're looking at 70 to 80% of students either using it now or going to be using AI. So the simplest answer is kind of all selection methods are going to be affected, and that's just based on the sheer amount of people who are going to be using it, because I think the processes that we all have in place now were not designed with AI in mind, and that's not a bad thing. It's just the rate of change has been astronomical. So I think it's really interesting in terms of talking about how candidates or how students are using AI as well, because there's varying degrees. There are, there's a spectrum, I think, in terms of looking at how it's being used. And for those who may have not seen some of the news stories, ChatGPT has recently passed the US medical exam. So someone who isn't a clinical practitioner or a doctor has used ChatGPT to pass the medical exam. It's passed the bar, which is the legal exam in the US. Someone is a non-technical person has just used it to get a top-level job at Google by passing all of their tech kind of tests that they have in place. So I think when you look at it, how it's being used in all kind of human assessments in all walks of life, that's where the simplest statement is that it is going to have an absolutely massive impact. And I think the varying degrees to which people are using it, and Manny touched upon this before, is yes, there have been services historically where people could improve their CV, their cover letter, to prep themselves before they go in. But looking at how we're seeing students using it at the moment, you can take it from one extreme, which is maybe tailoring a CV, a covering letter, to a job description. And that's really easy to do. You can copy and paste the job description into ChatGPT, and then you can say, please adapt my CV in line with the job description, and it will pull out all the keywords from the job description, and that's kind of the easiest way to bypass processes in place now. The other extreme, which I think is, for me, the really interesting part, is you can have the minimum amount of human input possible. So you could take an entire application process, an entire assessment process, and you could just say to ChatGPT, apply for this role and put me in the top percentile. Not quite like that, but using different prompts, you can get those answers. And ChatGPT, the interesting thing about it is, as a tool, it fabricates stuff as well. It doesn't just tell the truth. It can go off and create stories. And for me, that they're the kind of the two extremes, is you can use it to slightly enhance what you're doing, which is kind of already being done in non-AI ways right now, or you can use it to completely write everything that you're going to do. And I think looking at the overall impact, it's the focus for change is going to be on how are we adapting to this impact to assess and evaluate the individuals, not just an individual's responses that they've generated with AI.
So can you explain to me just, because we caught up last week, and I hadn't caught up, you're talking about open and closed systems. So is a closed system more like a recruitment process, I guess, end to end, whereas open is CVs, cover letters, just generating text?
Yeah, I think where you've got kind of closed responses and a kind of a system which has a kind of a start and end point, they are probably the most impacted when you're looking at it, because there'll be set questions. Those questions can be inputted quite easily into ChatGPT. Anything that involves a human inputting into it from a closed system point of view are the ones which I think are going to be most impacted. But something open like a CV covering letter is still going to have massive implications on it as well.
And Manny, is this a similar kind of conversation to you mentioned NACE conference, but also I guess just your general interactions amongst the employer group? Is it a similar sort of theme of conversation that you're picking up?
Yes, I unquestionably. I think it's determining how AI may not just assist in the recruiting, selection, identification process, but how, as Zach and Helen have alluded to, how can we detect AI, where in this case AI is a metaphor, if you will, for a lack of authenticity or genuineness on the part of the candidate, and a kind of bias which is incredibly difficult to tease out. I think that's currently the holy grail, right? As we think about AI at the moment, and that is, how do we leverage it in a positive way for good, yet at the same time, how are we on guard in the ways that it might be misused to misrepresent, to create an image of someone and their capabilities which is not accurate. And I think that tension is going to be around for a while. Only because of how rapidly, by its very design and nature, AI is intended to be. It's intended to evolve very quickly, like a kind of virus, I suppose, if you want to look for another image. And consequently, the pressures to stay abreast and to stay ahead, I think, are enormous and probably only growing.
Yes, I saw you popped in the chat that it's the fastest adopted technology platform in history, and yeah, it certainly feels that way. When I look back over, how it took a while for the iPhone to be adopted and other kind of things. So I even go back to at our conference. I am conscious I do sound a little bit like back in the day, but it took a couple of years for online application forms to be adopted, testing, trying, where the pace does seem very much faster. So this is a slight digression, Andy, but in the States, am I right that there is an ethics committee, an ethics group of employers and universities under the NACE umbrella actually looking at this and the implications?
Yes, I think that's happening not only at the individual institutional level, but more broadly within academic disciplines, professional associations that are all exploring this. NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers in the US, has a standards ethical practice working group that is constantly reviewing the profession to determine these kinds of guidelines. And they're obviously looking at AI usage right now from both the employer recruiting, talent acquisition perspective, as well as the job search perspective. So it'll be interesting to see where any of a number of organizations are going to land on this point.
Yeah, maybe something we should consider doing the same over here actually. Thanks, Manny. Helen, just sort of coming to actually, we started talking about actually the impact of various selection methods. So I'm interested to see if that's the same thing you see, but also, starting to think about those systems. What can employers start to do to mitigate the impact of AI, considering all the constraints we've talked about already?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I think there's a number of things which I really resonate with, and are kind of pertinent to a number of the conversations that we're having at Cappfinity. So I think a group that Manny and I were discussing earlier that I think we share in common is I chair a group of psychologists internationally within Cappfinity, and we're very lucky to have an external member, Professor Fred Oswald, who's at Rice University, and he's actually a member of the US National Artificial Intelligence Advisory Committee, and their number one objective at the moment is about how to create the best practice governance for us as providers and employers to understand how to navigate this evolving picture. So I think we're in the kind of the real hiatus of watching that governance and best practice start to emerge, and I think the more different groups can speak to one another and share information and learning, the easier it'll be to start to pin down some of those best practices. I think to answer your first point, Stephen, in terms of the impact from an assessment perspective, I think from the research that we have done at Cappfinity, I think there's a number of things which we would call out that impact kind of the conclusions that you can see in the media or elsewhere. And I think the more scientific publications that we can have to come forward to actually demonstrate the impact of AI on existing methodologies and inform the development of future ones will be really, really imperative. So speaking from our own research perspective, I think we see a really kind of mixed picture and a very kind of rapidly evolving picture. So the research that we've done with ChatGPT version 4, I think exactly as you would expect, and the examples that Zach gave are spot on. Anything that is knowledge based in its construct type is going to be very easy for an AI generative tool to complete, because it's got a right or wrong answer. That sort of assessment is going to be very susceptible to an AI tool. When you work through all the different types of constructs that are used in assessment for hiring, obviously there's wide ranging from personality through to behavioral competencies, to values, etc., all the way through to the cognitive end of the spectrum. And I think we see, a very varying picture with a wide variety of item types, and it's very sensitive in terms of how the AI system is fed the information. The research that we've done looks at how AI tools are typically responding to certain challenges, certain tasks, how the answers they give vary in terms of the complexity of the items, the response formats, the instructions that they're given, and of course whether or not it understands the underlying scoring model, which of course in most robust assessment processes would not be overtly known to the candidate. So there's a whole host of variables that kind of influence the success with which a candidate can have using AI. It's not quite as literal as please do it for me and here it is. There's a lot of complexity in the layers between, depending on the quality of the assessment in question. So I think, that research is very live and active. I think we feel very comfortable with the results that we've seen, particularly in relation to ChatGPT 4. I think the results that I saw as of yesterday even, it struggles incredibly with logical non-verbal items. Obviously this will be an evolving picture, and the behavioral items, as I say, there's a massive variety of different levels of success depending on the type of item type in question. I think in terms of mitigation, Stephen, to your second point, this is a very, very live subject with many of Cappfinity's clients, and Zach and I were again we're suffering experiences on that before. I think this is, I think, going to be a case of short-term, immediate. What do employers need to do now? Bearing in mind, typically for the UK early talent season, that's starting within the next 6 weeks for a number of organisations, through to a number of our clients wanting to, from a very positive perspective, plan for the future and go with us on an innovation journey in terms of how assessment will continue to evolve and embrace the changes that we've discussed. I think in terms of mitigation, I'd say that we have a number of clients on quite a continuum. We have some clients who are, as we've talked about on the call so far, very relaxed, very comfortable. They're quite happy for candidates to use AI as an assistance during the recruitment process. They don't perceive that as a threat. We also have a number of clients in specific industries who don't feel that way, who are at the other end of that continuum, and they regard the use of using an AI tool in the recruitment process specifically as a threat to an integrity breach. And their concern, quite legitimately, is if a candidate is prepared to cheat during the assessment process, they're concerned about their behaviour and authenticity in role, given some of the high stakes positions and decision making responsibilities that they would hold. So I think we are navigating a range of different client levels of comfort and advising accordingly. I think one of the models that Cappfinity have circulated to try and facilitate some of these discussions, we refer to it as a 3D model, which is sort of looking across the aspects of design, deterrence, and then detection in relation to cheating. So I think in terms of design, obviously, as an occupational psychologist, the first and foremost thing you can be doing is designing your process to be robust against these different measures. And I completely take Zach's point that several of these methodologies have not been born in the past 6 months. So that there is a huge research agenda underway, as we've discussed. I think the thing that we would really urge clients to do in the first instance, from a design perspective, is to step back and remember all the criteria across which they are evaluating their assessment solutions. So cheating is obviously one major criterion, but as is diversity, as is validity, as is the equity and fairness of the process, the legality of the process, alongside other things which we know matter so much to our clients, like candidate experience. And when you try and balance all of those things in equilibrium, there's a number of design recommendations that I think we would encourage clients to reflect on. So I think first and foremost, we would urge clients to consider, is their solution multimodal? That's a core design principle of Cappfinity solutions. We don't assess any of our behaviors or cognitive constructs in only one format or at only one point. We're using a huge variety of item types to collect multiple data points, and alongside that, underneath the cover, you've then got the opportunity to use a multitude of scoring mechanisms, and it's that complexity when those approaches are combined in very sophisticated algorithms. They're hurdled. It's very difficult for a candidate, even with a tool like Chat, to consistently cheat across that level of complexity of assessment. So I think that is something that we would really encourage clients to look at, alongside obviously many of the design features that have been in our industry for a while. So is how item banked is your solution? Is it timed? Bearing in mind all of the implications, as I said at the start, for diversity. Timed assessments is something Cappfinity have urged against for a long time for diversity reasons. So time recorded would be something which would be far better in terms of balancing all of these different implications, all the way through to considering the sorts of scoring that you're using. So Cappfinity for a long time have been very selective about our choices to use artificial intelligence in its own scoring, and that's something that we have chosen not to do on the basis of compliance with GDPR. And regularly across our campaign seasons, we will have clients come to us and ask for on behalf of candidates to have a human review. So it's really important for us, as it is for so many as suppliers, to be able to provide that transparency. So I think for us, Stephen, it's trying to get that balance across all those criteria. But there's a lot that can be done in the defence, and that's just from a design perspective.
Thanks, Helen. So Zach, is that something that you see as well? Do you recognise what Helen says? I'm also into this word proctoring that sort of seems to have come onto the radar that I only first heard about a month or so ago.
Yeah, I think there was a lot there, and I was kind of making some notes as Helen was talking through. I think, yeah, I looking at how candidates are using it and talking about mitigating the impact of it. I mean, I want to avoid being here for hours, so I'll try and condense my thoughts down. I think, and we'll probably touch upon this slightly later, but as AI becomes more adopted, not just in kind of the workforce, but also in terms of how candidates are using it as well, I think it's just going to be a constantly kind of evolving process. And from a mitigation point of view, there's quite a few bits that Helen pointed on, but I do believe in detection. I think we're dealing right now in a world where, again, as Helen mentioned, with processes opening in the kind of next 6 weeks for some people, where you are going to struggle to tell the difference between candidates who have used it and haven't used it, and kind of there's all sorts of questions that raises in terms of it being a kind of an equitable kind of playing field, and how do you differentiate between people who have used it to enhance the application and those who haven't. But I think personally, mitigating in the short term is one thing, and actually adapting processes in the long term is really going to be the only way to get around this. It's a mixture of kind of bandages on now, whilst also kind of assembling things as we go forwards, and I think that's the only way you can deal with technological change at this rate.
And if you can get a crystal ball and fast forward 12 months, where do you think you'll be, or is that too mean a question to ask?
No, caveat it with
no idea.
Not yet. I think first I just touched upon it then. It's looking at where AI itself is going to. So I think there's all kinds of questions which this prompts, because the recruitment processes will be adapted to kind of how widely used AI is, especially in the workforce. So if you look at jobs which we are recruiting for, when you're looking at kind of early talent, those, I think, some of the roles which are being hired into, maybe some of the roles which potentially could be at risk, kind of as the world evolves and adapts AI more readily, and that's going to be interesting in terms of how then recruitment processes are changed. Because I think if we were sat here in 12 months' time, I think most of us are going to be using AI in some sort of way in our day-to-day roles. I think that's almost a given, and it's something that I use, and I know it's something a lot of my colleagues use as well, to varying degrees. So Helen touched upon it and kind of hit the nail on the head. Processes will kind of need to be designed with this in mind. We are playing catch up at the moment, because rightly so, these processes weren't created because the tools that are out there now didn't exist up until November last year. And I think it's how you do adapt those processes, and I think there is going to be a line drawn for many people that some people will see using AI as cheating, and some people will see it as needing to adapt and bring it into actually being a skill that needs to be tested as part of the kind of criteria for the roles. I think someone mentioned in the chat a few minutes ago around kind of which companies are using AI in the recruitment processes now, and you're seeing a lot of this at the tech firms, where people are being asked to demonstrate their ability to use ChatGPT, particularly when it comes to coding, for instance. So I think it's already being adapted. I think the adoption rather has started where it kind of was created. So very much in tech-focused roles and companies, people are being evaluated on their ability to use AI. But yeah, if I was to dust off the crystal ball, Stephen, I would say detection is going to be a key part, because I think there will definitely be some industries where they want to be able to still actually test just the human and not the human's ability to generate responses. And I think that's a really key thing in highlighting. But I think in most instances, we are going to find ways of either adapting the processes that we've got, or actually how do we test someone's ability to use AI, because this is going to be a key skill set going forwards. I mean, the close thing is if you've got 80% of your candidates using AI when it comes to your application process, you are going to see a big difference, I believe, between the 80% who have and the 20% who haven't. And when you get to a world where you've got more than that using it, you'll be able to find more ways of actually between the two. Your kind of your bar rises. You're focusing on a different area. So I just think it's kind of ready to get, strap in really, because a lot is going to change. Yeah.
Manny, do you want to expand a bit on that, chat? Because Liz asked a question in the chat. I think it just came through to the panelists around the assessment in academic field. What's the level of usage that is seen as acceptable? I think you had the similar view that was it might vary, but I don't want to put words into your mouth.
Yeah, I mean, I think Helen and Zach have really spoken to this. All processes will change. It's as simple as that. How quickly they will change, how effectively they will change, obviously, are all the things that we're talking about and exploring right now. Helen's work is designed to do just that, right? I think that from my perspective, AI is just going to be increasingly embedded in everything that we do. If you think about so many of the tools that job seekers have available to them today, for example, it's literally impossible to find one that doesn't utilize AI in some way. The early AI kind of efforts were in terms of using algorithms to build, recommendation engines, so to speak. Well, now, obviously we're far beyond that. So I think that for people today, and I use that term specifically, all of us, not just the candidate or not just the recruiting organization, we're seeing AI infused in everything that we do. So I think it will be more acceptable, if you will. This kind of initial, I don't want to quite say Luddite view of technology, but that's always been the case. Who can imagine today not having access to some kind of internet search, tool? I mean, it's unfathomable that anyone could do their work without that, or do their work without some kind of email tool, or do their work without, some kind of chat tool. I think ChatGPT and its various iterations, I think it's just going to be on everyone's desktop, and no one will be thinking twice about doing certainly routine work utilizing those tools. I also think, to Zach's point, when we think about the impact on recruiting and hiring and which industries, I think what we're going to see is, our processes are going to be driven by what kind of talent we need. And I think that's something that is yet unclear what the impact will be. As I talk to my colleagues in, career services and career advising work, and I'm assuming some of them are, listening in on this call, I think there is a fear if AI tools, which demonstrably can do arguably a better job more quickly, more comprehensively in giving a candidate advice about their resume or about their cover letter, and any of a number of those areas, I think advisors are like, well, what's my role? Why am I needed? Well, and I think it's important to note that what ChatGPT and other AI does not do is make those connections for the candidate. So as an advisor, yes, I love the idea that students come to me with a much stronger resume initially, if they use ChatGPT, that I can help them refine, because I may have more knowledge about the particular employer, about the particular role, because of the relationship my office, my team, my institution has with a particular employer. And I think Helen made this point earlier, and that is, assessment is not only going to have to get smarter, but it's going to continue to rely on broader kinds of efforts. So the idea of looking at the whole person, so to speak, is only going to become more in vogue. I think there are certainly ways that you can use in your initial presentation AI to put the best particular polish. I think that's fine. I think once you get to, can I do the tasks required for the position, how you assess that, the circumstances and conditions under which you assess, I think you can increasingly mitigate, for the use of AI as you would in that initial presentation piece.
Yeah.
So
great.
again, I think that, I think it's, do you view this with enthusiasm and excitement and see it as a huge opportunity, or do you see that the glass half empty, so to speak, as a threat? I think that's going to continue to be a topic of discussion.
Agreed. I don't think it's definitely not going away. So I heard somebody spoke that ChatGPT is like Google on steroids. It's still Google, it's still a search engine, but it's Google on steroids, which I thought was great. Helen, what's your crystal ball looking like? Is it kind of, if I said to you, what do you think it'll look like in 12 months? How will the work you do, employees' work change? Or is it still really we're in the foothills of change at the moment?
Yeah, I think it really does develop every day. When I compare, week to week, I think that is the kind of pace of learning at the moment. I think what will become very clear as campaigns, particularly for early talent, start to open, is that I think what will change compared to where we are now is that employers will make it clear to candidates where they sit on that continuum I mentioned earlier. So I think we'll absolutely see a rise in very explicit integrity statements at the start of assessment. So for those organizations who are not happy with candidates using it in the process, that will be made absolutely transparent. And then, the candidate has a choice as to whether or not they continue to use it or not. But those terms, if you like, from the employer have been made very, very clear, and the implications thereof. I think that will kind of be one chapter. I think seeing the data emerge from this season of assessment will be absolutely imperative. So Manny, Zach, everyone has mentioned detection. The technological solutions that Cappfinity has been working on at pace this season, and we've tracked candidate cheating for very many years, obviously in more traditional formats, but I think my view on this, Stephen, the facts are friendly. We are very, very intrigued with our own data sets to see what plays out. At the moment we see no change in our score distributions, and we will be entirely guided by the evidence that plays out before us. So I think 12 months down the line, that will give enough time for particularly the assessment and the psychology industry to collaborate on learning in terms of how assessment evolves. I think speaking to my peers and the great professionals that we work with, I think there's a lot of appetite to innovate, to test all the things that we've been describing. I think especially in the cognitive space, where we know that AI is finding it much easier to complete assessments. I think there's great opportunity for assessment to evolve and enhance further.
Thanks,
Stephen. Can I?
Yeah, sure.
Stephen, I was just one quick point that Helen's comments prompted me to articulate, and that is that the innovation and the solutions to the kinds of challenges we're describing here, they're not going to come from the employer recruiting community, and they're not going to come from higher education. They're going to come from the service providers like Cappfinity and others who are really looking at these problems and trying to find solution sets. And I think that's an important point to make. I think we sometimes assume a particular industry or a specific recruiting organization is going to figure it out on their own, or a particular university or university system is going to figure this out. And the reality is that's not the way it works in the current world. And I think that it's incredibly important to recognize the work that service providers like Cappfinity and others, how impactful it really is to the work that we're trying to do here. Because without them, without the work that Zach does, without the work that Helen does in their respective offerings, we would not be able to deal with these challenges and opportunities. So I just want to call that out, because I think sometimes we could do a better job of working with them to help solve these problems than perhaps that we have been known to do in the past.
Yeah, great. I assume that's something you'd echo as well, Zach.
Yeah, I mean it's such a, I'm trying to find the words to describe it. It's something that we are within our business talking about every single minute of the day, and it's something also that we've been trying to come up with solutions for years. Although that ChatGPT 3 was became, as Manny points out, the most widely adopted technology tool ever, and that came out in November last year. AI kind of in its kind of generative form now, and in the models that are used to power these kind of tools, have been around for many years, and it's something that we've been working on. Going, this is someday soon, this is going to change everything. So I think when you see a lot of the solutions that are coming out there, these, whilst they are in some instances might be short-term solutions to a problem, these solutions have been being worked on for years in some instances. It hasn't necessarily come in as a it's not been a huge revelation that this was going to change the way in which we work and operate. It's more just been, I guess, the pace at which things have gone at, which has been the most startling.
Yeah, it seems like it's become hyper relevant very, very quickly. Whereas, yeah, like I said, it's been. I mean, I was that example you said about the law firm. I thought, well, that technology must be around for quite a while, but we never talked about it because it wasn't quite as impactful as it is now.
I was going to just caveat your Google on steroids example, because being a kind of a technologist myself, I would say it's a lot more impressive than Google on steroids. What we have with Google and kind of Web 1 and Web 2.0 platforms is the ability to search and collate data. And that's always been the most amazing thing about kind of Manny pointing out, saying that everyone's got a search engine at the fingertips. What we have now with things like ChatGPT, to put it in context, is all of the information that's ever existed on the internet is at someone's fingertips in the same way which a search engine has been. But now generative AI can spit that information back out in a format which makes the user seem like they know what they're talking about. And that's been the fundamental change in this, and the shift is that it's not Google on steroids. It's putting words in people's mouths, and I think the change there has been the most startling change, and I think we're just starting to see the beginning of it.
Agreed. I think that's a very good point. I am conscious of time because we do like to finish these on the hour, because yes, people obviously have other Zoom meetings to go to, even just to grab a spot of lunch. Or breakfast, as in your time zone, Manny. So I've got one quick question for the three of you, and then I have got some that have come through on the Q&A and on the chat that we'll get to as well. So what should we say to students? Because of course students are at the sharp end of this, and they're going, probably all their friends go, well, I used it and nobody said I shouldn't. So what should we say to students at the moment around whether it's their academic world or whether it is actually in the recruitment process? Can I go to you first, Manny?
I think that you will have differing points of view on this, I suspect, certainly in the States. But so let me answer how I approach it and how our team approaches it. And I think in general, how most of our colleagues in this career space approach it. And that is to embrace its use. I think that if it allows students as candidates to prepare themselves more effectively, if it allows us to do our work more effectively and bring the kind of wisdom and experience that we have and complement the basic work with that wisdom and experience, then I think frankly it's naive to attempt to ignore it or legislate it out of use in this particular, set of circumstances and use cases. So I think we tell students, by all means, if you want us to review your resume, happy to. We might suggest you might want to use ChatGPT or, frankly, any of the other service provider tools that embed ChatGPT in giving you feedback about your resume. By all means, use it. Then let's sit down and talk about it, where we can, kind of complement and put the final touches on it. I think that will be the mainstream view everywhere. It may not be at the moment, but I think that's inevitably where we're going in terms of the work that we do as career advisors, and that we'll continue to stay abreast of these developments and be greatly influenced by our recruiting partners. At the end of the day, the work that we do is reflective of what the hiring world needs and how they go about identifying and recruiting that talent. So we have to be nimble enough to adjust, as our partners begin to adjust their processes.
Great advice, Manny. Helen, can I ask the same of you? And I was going to sneak in a question actually from the that was in the chat, because I think you raised this about some organisations would be happy to use ChatGPT. Some would see it as, and I come from the world of professional services where ethics is important in every role, but anybody who ever there's a whiff of impropriety on a CV, they're out of the process because you think, well, they do it now, they'll do it with the client. So yes, your attitude to students. The reason I've woven that other bit from the chatting, because I'm guessing in the advice to students is also around actually what you say about using or not using it.
Yes, absolutely, Stephen. So I think more broadly, I think our advice to candidates would be one of trying to build their confidence in I think a space where I think actually students can feel quite as you say, sort of unsure about what to do, and everyone's sort of looking at each other in terms of just different decisions that people will take. So I think obviously for a long time, Cappfinity have advocated for authenticity and the opportunity for candidates to demonstrate their potential to employers in a really fair and robust way, and to do so honestly. So prior to AI, we've always encouraged candidates to be honest and give genuine responses, because ultimately down the line they're going to have to deliver in a role and be happy in it. So I think our advice there has not changed, even in the face of AI being available to them. I think we are still completely behind that message to students around think about the fulfillment from being authentic in a job, your ability to do it, the fulfillment you'll get from it. I think absolutely your point, Stephen, around really being sort of aware of where the employer that you're applying to sits on their level of comfort. So if there is an explicit integrity statement which says they don't use it, then it's very clear what those implications are. And I think the readiness of many clients across suppliers with a variety of tech detection mechanisms in place, if you are caught using AI when you've been asked not to, I think it's approaching those situations with eyes wide open. But I think our fundamental message would be one of building candidate confidence, using it in preparation to increase your confidence of knowing that you can do well in the assessment, and that those assessments are, when they're designed robustly, which traditional occupational psychology has always advocated for, there shouldn't be a need to give yourself a competitive advantage with AI. But I think the next 12 months will be indicative to see this trend play out, and for us to respond accordingly.
Great, thanks, Helen. And Zach, what would your advice be to any students that are unsure what to do?
Yeah, well, the advice we're currently giving is similarly, not to put on your CV things that are maybe exaggerations of the truth, such as I speak business level French when you only know how to ask where the library is. Same with GPT is to check it, because it will fabricate stuff. If you ask it to write something which will make you seem kind of better than you are, it will tell stories. That's what it's kind of designed to do, and you could end up in a tricky situation. So not to allow it to go off to that extent, which it can and has the power to do.
Right, excellent. Right, so let's get to so we've covered some of the questions just in our conversation so far, but I think there's some that we haven't. So let's try and get to those in the last 5 minutes. So a question from Sean. So what assessment says question types, but I guess what assessment tools? Are there any that are relatively safe from the misuse of AI by candidates? You want to take that? I guess that's one for you, Zach or Helen.
You want to go first, Zach?
Yeah, sure. I think we'll probably have slightly differing opinions on this, and I think that's probably the nature of just where we are in how things are evolving. But anything which you typically have to create a written response, or you are sat there and there are responses that you need to do from like a multiple choice point of view, they aren't safe. So anything that you can take from the screen and input it into ChatGPT or something similar, I would say they're not kind of safe in quotation marks, depending on the kind of the level of safe, and even in interviews, having another screen which is able to give you the answers that you need sometimes is something that we've seen students doing. So it's not that I would say the word is safe. I think the key is in how you adapt the questions and how you adapt the kind of I guess change in which the answers that you're looking for. But as it stands now, anything that involves a candidate writing or even it kind of inputting, they can use ChatGPT and other tools to kind of, I guess, game those kind of tests.
And would you say something similar, Helen, or?
I think what Zach describes, I totally resonate with a lot of. I think what we would say is on a broad continuum of constructs, anything traditional like an application form, anywhere where you need to generate text is going to be very easy for something like a tool like ChatGPT to facilitate. I think the research that we've seen, I think the cognitive items, obviously where there is a right or wrong answer, those ones are going to be very susceptible to a tool like chat. I think as you get into the behavioural end and more of the non-verbal logical items, that's where we don't see the consistent performance from the tool. So I think it really does depend on what you're measuring, and then the level of sophistication of the items, and also the scoring, because I think a lot of the responses we've seen, chat gives a very confident answer on, we think this item is measuring this, which may or may not be right, and then it also will try and give advice on how you should answer. And of course that depends on what the employer is assessing and to what extent they want that particular behavior. So I think we often differentiate between power scoring and optimal scoring. So power scoring, where just basically more is better, is going to be very susceptible. Optimal scoring, where on a per client basis, you've got a variation of what is actually needed for that particular job role to predict success, which varies by organization, is going to be much more difficult to know. Even if chat can say, I think it's this, the candidate won't necessarily know if that is in fact the right response to give, which is back to our original point of answering authentically and trying to demonstrate what you think is the right way to behave in response to those questions.
And is there an element whereby it's one of the questions that Manny has actually answered in the Q&A? I was also thinking about it from an EDI lens. So it was a conversation actually yesterday around candidates that, historically candidates, with, good, strong middle-class families, lots of peer support, can help their kids, if my daughter can't write a decent CV and application for them, there's something wrong with maybe she won't, because she won't listen to her dad, but anyway. But if you haven't got that kind of input, actually, is this either a way of leveling the playing field, or does it almost become even harder for those that don't know about ChatGPT or don't use it? I don't know if there's, I know it's a little bit of an uncertain thing at the moment, but actually, could this be a good or a bad thing for EDI? I don't know, Manny, can I ask you that first?
Yeah, I respond to my own personal point of view is that, yes, it could be an incredibly impactful tool. If we think about candidate success that's built on networking, understanding experiences, how people of privilege have access to more information and support, then I see ChatGPT like like many, like having an encyclopedia in your home decades ago, to having use of Wi-Fi and access to internet browsers. It is the great equalizer, or at least it gives you the potential. So my feeling is any technology which allows you to better represent your authentic self and position it is a positive thing. I think that's the approach that we need to think about relative to, again, these kinds of functions and these kinds of expectations that we have for candidates.
Any thoughts from you, Zach, on that same question?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes both ways. Not to kind of sit there and be the devil's advocate in this, but I also think that there are it creates more barriers as well. So it might knock some walls down, but I think it also creates additional barriers in terms of, one, some of the best tools are behind a paywall. Not everyone's going to want or can afford to pay £20 or $20 a month to get access to certain tools. But secondly, the art kind of using AI is in your ability to write prompts and your skill set with using that as well. And I think how you get trained and how you learn how to use that will create its own barriers as well. So it's yes and no. It kind of is my politician's answer.
Well, it's always the way when it's uncertain. There isn't a clear answer. And Helen, what would you say about the EDI piece? Thoughts were good, not so sure, or we still got to work it out, really?
I think a bit of both, Stephen. I think undoubtedly when we introduced Preparation Plus, one of our preparation tools for candidates, we saw a positive impact on diversity. So giving it a level playing field, so that, exactly as you say, you're not dependent on socioeconomic circumstances to get access to preparation. So I think based on that experience, if this if this tool can increase access to information from a preparation perspective, I think we'd hypothesize it would be a positive thing, but completely take Zach's point as well about the monetary access point to it as well. So it's slightly paradoxical at the same time.
Right, that's great. We've just gone past 2 o'clock, so, and I see the count numbers dropping off a little bit, so I guess people have 2 o'clocks to get to. So we'll call it a wrap there. I'm just going to mention in the chat, actually, because I think it just came through to the panel. Amy's asked a question about specific career staff training out there for careers people. And Manny, you mentioned Superhuman newsletter and a LinkedIn AI group as good resources. So yeah, just passing that message on. So if you are from careers colleagues, there's some resources there. And just a little bit of explanation around NACE. NACE in America, if you think AGCAS and ISE in the UK combined, that's NACE. It's in the one organisation in the States. Very good organisation, NACE. So yeah, I definitely recommend to use those resources. Manny, Helen, Zach, really thank you very much for taking the time. You've done all the talking today, so it's been great to just make it easy to chair a session like this, because you've got such expert knowledge. So really do appreciate it. I am sure we will be coming back to this many, many times in the future. I can tell by the attendance numbers when we do this subject, it's kind of the attendance that we had in the pandemic. So it obviously is a hot topic for everybody. So big thank you from myself and on behalf of our audience for taking part. As I said at the start, we have recorded this. So you will get a link. So please do feel free to pass that along amongst colleagues, because we are keen, as always, to share the learning within the organisation and our memberships. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Talk to you all soon. Bye now.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks.
Bye-bye, everybody.
The best. Thank you.